Hi, friend. Logan Clements here with the Better Events Podcast. And in this week's episode, we are talking all about raising your rates. It's a good time of year to start thinking about that, whether you are someone who negotiates your own proposals or you're someone who's thinking about asking for a raise at your full-time job. This episode is for you. We talk all about when we have those conversations, how we have those conversations, some lessons learned, and some regrets we've had. So hope you enjoy this week's episode.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of the Better Events Podcast. We are thrilled, as always, to be with you this fall season and for this episode, which we know is going to be a hot one. We think you all are going to enjoy this. So today we're talking about raising rates and just all of the details that have to do with that because it can be very scary. But before we get into that, we have our conversation starter, Logan. So 'tis the season. What's something that you're excited about between now and the end of the year? What do you got going on?
I am so excited, Mary, that I get to do some traveling. I feel like it has been a crazy up and down year. It's been a lot of work travel, but this one's for fun, and I'm going to a new continent. I'm going to visit one of my best friends in Australia, which I have never been to before. And so I am taking pretty significant amount of time off. In about a week, I'm getting on a plane, and I'll be gone for a lot of November. And I'm just really excited to just be a tourist and have fun and just I get to experience her expat life and just see how different things are in Australia. I feel like there are similarities to the US, but excited to learn kind of what the nuances are.
I'm so excited for your trip on your behalf. It sounds amazing in so many ways, so we're excited to hear about it. For me,
How
I
about
would
you?
say, yeah, I am excited about some travels as well. I'm going to the Dominican Republic. I've never been there, so that will be fun. It's going to be relaxing, which I have not always been that person, but now I'm the person who enjoys a relaxing trip. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, some time on the beach, some warm weather. That all sounds
Yeah,
lovely.
it's going to be like 80 degrees. It's going to be perfect.
Listeners, you don't have to have a vacation plan these next 2 months, but if you don't have one planned at all in the future, I highly encourage you looking. They do some Black Friday deals on flights and things. It's always nice to have a trip to look forward to. But I do want to plug our Better Events Conference. There's still time to join us in person in Seattle on Thursday, December 18th. It is a full day conference. Tickets are on sale, and they do give you access to recordings from our virtual day that happened back on October 1st and our whole library of brain bites. So if you're thinking about joining us, we know a number of you are flying in, which we are so excited for. A number of you are also local to the Seattle or Washington State area, but we cannot wait to meet you. So if you're thinking about joining us, head over to bettereventspod.com/conference to learn more and purchase your tickets. And I feel like a segue, Mary, is that this topic we're talking about comes out of a question that we got, or a topic that got brought up by one of our attendees, and a couple other people alluded to this topic in our lovely form that we asked folks to let us know what they wanted to hear about. And raising rates is definitely one that you and I talk about like offline a lot. Maybe probably not enough, but and it's one that I know I always want to be a fly on the wall for other conversations that planners are having. So that's the goal of this episode, is to kind of bring you in, listeners, as Mary and I talk through some of the tough things that come along with the conversation or decision to raise your rates. I also want to caveat that this topic applies not only to folks who are business owners or freelancers where you're setting your own rates, but this is also a good framework if you're someone who works for someone else, you work internally, you have a salary, and maybe it's time to start thinking about asking for an increase in your salary or a promotion. Again, a lot of what we're talking about can really apply. I know it just feels, I think, a little more personal for those of us that are freelancers or small business owners, since we have to answer for the why are your rates what they are. So, Mary, first question's coming to you. What are some signs that it's time to raise your rates, either as a freelancer or if you were asking for a raise or a promotion?
I think the biggest thing is when you start feeling like the time you're spending on something either isn't valued or isn't worth it. Now, not all of us are monetarily motivated. I've shared, I think, before that I am not monetary motivation is not my first motivation. I've gotten more monetarily motivated over time because of this type of question. It does help to feel like you are getting paid, whether you work for yourself or not, and whether you say fairly or just in a way that makes you just more happy about the work that you're doing. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing that most of us can relate to. The one other caveat I'll say from my side of things is the biggest thing that has influenced us to think about this on our team is that we have a team. We have like full-time employees that we need to be paying for. So are we charging enough for their time as well? So I'll leave it at that. But Logan, what would you add?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just really, yeah, whether you're monetarily motivated or not, some of it also just comes with time. Like, how long have you been doing what you're doing? And for me, I think a good indicator is if I'm not getting pushback, meaning someone says, how much would it be to work for you? Or like, here's a proposal. If you're getting 90% of the people are being like, that sounds great, love working with you. That's where I'm starting to be like, ooh, maybe I need to charge a little more because everything should be a negotiation, and you just want to make sure you're not undervaluing yourself. And that's something I even just last month in October, I celebrate 9 years of working for myself. So that's 9 years of negotiating my own rates. And I still think I'm learning because I think I undervalue some of what I'm bringing to the table and the problems I'm helping clients solve. So I think time is another thing. And once you've been doing things long enough in the event world, I think just having this be like an annual or every 2 years process, or I don't know, Mary, with you and your team, if you have to do it even more frequently than that, it's nice to revisit just because, yeah, I think it's one of those things that I don't like the money side of business of what I do. And so it's easier to keep things the same. And then you just wake up one day and realize like, ooh, I think I'm undercharging.
For sure. Yeah. I think, and Logan, like we have worked jobs, you and I, outside of our business. Like before we started our business, we had full-time jobs where I'm guessing, did you experience this feeling of like, wow, I wish that maybe I could ask for a raise or a promotion or some sort of that? Because I definitely did. And that's one of the reasons that I started my business is because I was like, I don't know that I can get there without doing things on my own. So yeah. Did you kind of experience that as well?
Yeah, well, I joke the reason I worked for myself was because I was the one helping like write the budgets for events, and so I saw how much we were paying freelancers, and they were making what I was making full time, but they were making it off of like working a handful of events for us a month, and I was like, "Are you telling me that I could make the same amount of money but work less hours?" And I was doing the chronic, like definitely doing way things outside my job description. I was helping troubleshoot, like the Wi-Fi went down in our office. I'm the person you asked for help. Like it was just like there were too many other things that took up time. So, yes, but I also did have to experience asking for a promotion or like asking for a raise, not necessarily a promotion, but a raise, and that negotiating process when I worked full time. And I'd say it was similar. I probably had to, as a freelancer, I think you get a little bit more freedom to just say like, oh, I'll just take a different gig. When you work full time, you have a little less bargaining tools. But like I did the whole thing where I made a PowerPoint presentation. I'd like looked up numbers of the accounts I worked on and the events and how they'd grown and the positive feedback I've gotten. But I tried to have like numbers and hard metrics of like, here's the growth I've brought to this company by working here. So you should pay me more. And they like gave me a very significant raise that I all of a sudden then was like, oh, wow, I was really being underpaid. Like it was like, I'm flattered, but also this means I should have done this earlier.
I think it's good to reflect back on those moments because we talk so much about business here, but we did start not working for ourselves and so yeah, a lot of us I think experienced. We interrupt this episode to remind you of our upcoming in-person day of the Better Events Conference on Thursday, December 18th in downtown Seattle. We would love to see you there. If you already have purchased tickets and attended the first day, our virtual day of the conference, you can upgrade your ticket. Just check your swap card email and we'll get you squared away. If you have not attended the conference yet this year and would like to, you can check out bettereventspod.com/conference, and there is a link for you to purchase your in-person day ticket as well.
Yes, and I love the option there because you can retroactively get access to some of the recordings, not all of the sessions from our virtual day, but you can go back if you feel the FOMO that you couldn't join us in person. So upgrade your existing ticket or purchase a ticket if you hadn't pulled the trigger yet. We are going to have an amazing day filled with interactive workshops, small group work. Again, think of what we were saying about the virtual. It's that interactive piece. We're going to deliver what we promise of you meeting 3 new people and learning 3 new things that you can apply to your event process immediately.
And we know that virtual events can be magical, and it was magical. We also know that the energy that's going to be in the room for the in-person day is just something that is unparalleled. So we are encouraging you to join us and be a part of that if you're able. All right, we have so much to look forward to during that day of the conference, and so we hope to see you there.
And without further ado, let's get back to the episode.
Logan, you have raised your rates before. Can you tell us about a time that you've done so, or when you've asked for more for something like you kind of just mentioned and it went successfully?
Yes. Well, this one's fun because as a freelancer, I have a combination of both. I think the one that stands out to me the most of when I felt success, I didn't even ask for it. It was more learning the lesson that when you work freelance or contract work, it's best to see if they will give you a number first or a range or an idea. And this was back maybe when I'd only been working for myself for like 3-4 years. I got my first international gig after moving back to the US. And the person was like, let me see what we have in our budget and I'll let you know. And they came back to me with a number that today, I can't even tell you how much it was. It might've been like $500, $600 a day, but I was going for a significant amount of time, like 2 or 3 weeks. So that multiplied, like that was a big chunk of change. They were like, oh, it's this per week. And I remember being like gobsmacked because I would not have asked for that much. Like I would have just, if they had said, Logan, tell me how much you would have charged to go do this, because I was really excited about the project. It was people I really wanted to work with. Like I would have probably charged them way too little. They'd also met me on a project where I was making like $150 a day. And so $600 a day felt crazy. Like, and it was just this moment where I realized I was like, I would have like done damage to myself if I had been allowed to give them a number first. So that was like my first step. If you're unsure, like it's always okay to ask them. Now, clients sometimes don't know what to value what we're doing. So know that then sometimes that might be a lowballing. You're always welcome to negotiate. So that's one that always stands out in my head, because then I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I should charge. And then about 2 years ago, I worked for a new client doing a different kind of sporting event, and they came to me with a day rate that was lower than what I'd been charging at the time, pretty significantly by like a couple $100 a day. Again, it was going to be a couple week event. And so I ended up looking at it and being like, that doesn't feel great. But what I did is I called somebody who had introduced me, and I just said, hey, I just want to know, like, is this actually your starting rate and there's no wiggle room on this, or do you normally negotiate? And they go, oh yeah, that's a starting point. They're always willing to negotiate. I said, great, because I want to do this project. I just know I've learned for myself, if I feel undervalued financially in a project, that puts a bad taste in my mouth while I'm working the event. And so I went back to them and said, okay, that number you gave, normally I charge, and I did the range method, which we learned in our book club at that, was it the Chris Voss book, right? Negotiate.
Now that you're asking it,
I'll put it in the show notes. But there's a book on negotiation, and he talks about, instead of saying like my rate is $500, you say normally for something like this, I charge between $400 and $600, and that allows the person to settle naturally at that $500. And I literally did that for this example, where I was like, that's a little lower than I normally go, so I like bumped it up by $50, and it was like, normally I would charge this range. Sure enough, they met in the middle. Ironically, looking back, I was like, I got like a 30% raise just in that one phone call and one email, which is wild. So very long anecdote. But I was like, I just learned to negotiate. Like that's one, and you don't have to always do it the same. Like one was me asking them first. The other one was me, calling and doing research. But Mary, how about you? What's a successful time that you raised your rates?
Yeah. Well, I love what you shared, because I think there's lots of really good tips and tricks in there. And I have so many thoughts, so I'll try to keep it concise. Okay, so yeah, a time when we successfully raised our rates. So first of all, we raise our rates about $5 every year per hour, but we don't charge hourly. Normally, we charge a flat rate, but that flat rate is based on hourly pricing. And so that is based on that $5 an hour increase, if you're following me, if that makes sense. And so that's what we do. And no one has asked about it ever. So would you say that's a success? Maybe. No one's had a problem with it, right? And that's just something that we keep doing. I think people generally know that folks' rates are going to be increasing every year. So I think that's one call out, is if you are not increasing your rate every year, that's something to consider, whether that is your paid job, your promotion, or whatever you do for business or freelance. Because everybody else does it. Think of the vendors that you're working with, especially like catering. Like, we see those costs go up so much every year. So that's just kind of the name of the game. But we had a specific client that is a corporate client that unfortunately doesn't have we don't have a great rate with them. But one of the reasons we do it is because it's a noteworthy client, and we get some consistent work from them. So it kind of makes it worth it in a way, because we can plan on it more than other things. So with that in mind, I learned that the hours that we worked for their events made my team go into overtime. And so then our rate was not justified, because we were losing money when those team members were working that job. And so it was very basic, like, we really enjoy this, but because of like the cost of labor, and I explained, like, we're a small business and the overtime implications, we have to raise this rate or we can't do it anymore. Like, and I think that made a lot of logical sense. Like, most people would understand that. And so we raised the rate by almost $20 an hour. It was the biggest thing like that I've ever done in that regard, and they were fine with it. The rate still isn't great, so you can imagine we weren't getting paid very much at the beginning. But they did ask, they're like, how much do you normally raise your rates every year? That's a lot. And I had to explain that actually, well, we really didn't start in the right place, and kind of had to apologize for that, almost like learned a lesson. And now we're getting to what like actually makes sense for the business. And from now on, you could expect like a 5% increase, but not more than that. And so that was kind of an interesting experience. I'm glad that it went well. And I'm glad that they were like logically able to understand what I was trying to explain to them.
Yeah, no, that's hard when especially, if having to do a big jump. But I think whenever you have that justification, because for whatever reason, just being like, oh, we just need to make more money, doesn't sit well with either party. So I'm glad you're able to lay it out that way. During the year, Mary, when do you like to have the rate or compensation conversation with your clients, and how do you initiate it?
So this is something that I'll be honest with you all about. This is not like a set conversation that we really have. So I would love to hear, Logan, how you're implementing this. Because like I said, we kind of just do that behind the scenes increase that no one asks about. So I'm not upfront about it. And I think that is an angle though that you can go about it, honestly. And like I said, no one has asked. And so I don't think it's enough for them to be concerned. So yeah, that's not a great answer, but that's the reality of kind of where we're at. We're not having the conversation. So Logan, what about you?
Yeah, well, I would challenge that, because I bet you do kind of tangentially, like when you're doing an updated proposal for the new event, you might not be calling out, oh, the rates went up by this much, but like, I bet you're doing a little bit of groundwork of, this is what we did last year. It's a similar scope, now it costs X. For me, I'm trying to get in the habit of doing it annually. I had the realization this year for 2 agencies I've worked with now for 4 years. I have not raised the rates in like 3 years. So I have found if you wait until the new calendar year starts, like January, I've already signed contracts for 2026. And so if I'm not talking about this, and if I wait to talk about this stuff until January, I'm a little too late. So I started about mid this year discovering, I'm like, oh, I got to raise my hourly rates as a show caller and a producer for some of my corporate agencies. And I go, cool. As soon as they ask me about 2026, I'm just letting them know, hey, my hourly, because this is an exception to it. Like, I do a lot of project rates like you, Mary, that are based internally on hours, but some of my agency work, it's based on an hourly rate or just like a day rate, but that's my day rate divided by 10 is my hourly, like if you want to reverse engineer it. And it was like, oh, I haven't raised them in 3 years. So they're like, hey, are you available for this? And I go, yep, just so you know, as of, January 1, 2026, or I say any events that are getting executed in 26, my rates are going up, because I will probably start working on some of these events while it's still 25. And no one has pushed back. To your point, Mary, it's similar. Like, I think I'm increasing it by $5. Like, and that was something that I have put on a Post-it note in my office, is like thinking about inflation inflation is a thing. It's why your F&B charges go up at an event, why hotels will charge more year to year. Like $5 from 2 years ago does not go as far as $5 today. And like the inflation rate, depending on if you're an economics person, can be anywhere from like 3% to like upwards of like 8 or 9 or 10%. Like it can be pretty big. And so that's something that I hold on to, because I'm not as specific as you are, Mary, where it's like 5% increase. I think I've tried to avoid more than a 10% increase it without scope changing and more things being taken on. But like, I really advocate for any contractors I hire. I want to pay them more each year. I want to be able to pay myself more each year. And so to achieve that, I do need to increase my rates. And so, yeah, I think it's when I'm talking about next year, I will start that conversation early. And like you, I haven't had any pushback. I also do what you do, where I just put it in the proposal. And so to work with me last year was, $3,500. Now to work with me, it's $3,650. And again, no one has really blinked an eye. I think it would be if it's a big jump of like doubling or 2 timesing, I would call that out and say, hey, this is a lot more. Like I had another client, I was like, hey, this is more because I'm doing a site visit for you. And so that includes me flying out, spending a day and a half, checking out the venue, coming home. I can take that out if you don't have the funds for that, but that's why this jumped. So I think that hopefully that helps you listeners like frame different ways you can approach this.
And from that example, you actually did remind me of something that we just started this year. So I will mention that. And you're right, Logan. There's one instance. This was one of my former team members' ideas. So shout out to her. But she was suggesting that we do kind of like a sales promo in like the summertime ish. So I ended up sending it in September to all of our current or past clients. And I mentioned that our rates will increase in 2026. They increase every year by that 5%. So if you'd like to book with us before the end of like September, I think is what I said, then we'll lock in the 2025 pricing, which, I've shared this with some people and they're like, oh, that kind of screws you over. Like, and especially if you did that again next year, then they like are always at the 2025 pricing. I'm not worried about that. Also, it was something that I needed to do now. You know what I mean? So we'll deal with what happens in the future there. But our rate has enough margin that like I would be happy to honor it for a number of clients if it means that we can project and actually commit, which is one of the biggest issues that we have. So did it work? I mean, I think so. We were able to book 2 clients from that, which is just sooner than before, right? Because people love to wait. So if it made them book any sooner, I say it's a win. And one of them is one of our biggest events of the year. And so I think that is exciting. And so that might be an example of notifying people of it, I guess, and doing a promo around it.
That's a cool way to do it. Yeah, I think especially for you, like with the team, cash flow is probably a little bit more, has more ramifications than when you're an individual. I love that idea. And I mean, it sounds like, you did a summer deal that you turned into a September deal. So listeners, you could do this deal at any time.
Exactly. Yeah. Just get them in before the end of the year, basically. So yeah.
Yeah. This next question, we both kind of answered it already, but I'd love to just explicitly say it. What language or approach do you use to justify a rate increase, especially if the scope hasn't changed much?
So this actually might be getting into the nitty-gritty too much, but honestly, the best ammo, if you will, that I have for this conversation is to talk about labor costs. And because think of our production and AV partners, they literally have the line item in their contracts that is labor. And we don't necessarily list ours out as explicitly, but as soon as I explain to people, we have to pay them for their time that they're on site and working, and their rates are increasing. And then people get it. Like I've never had that question. And so that's something that has helped justify our rate, is talking about the lovely labor phrase. Logan, what about you?
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. Or like I even frame it as like the A team. Like you want the good people. We had these good people last year. They're in higher demand because they're good. We want to, keep them with us. And then, yeah, also just like, cost of living increases. It's just standard. I think, again, if you're not price gouging, where I hear awful reactions are like when it's like a 30% jump for no reason. I mean, we can all complain about whether it's food and beverage, hotel, AV, whatever cost is just we can't understand why it's jumped so much. So I think I just would talk about that. And then having a time frame of when this kicks in. And that's why I say when you get ahead of it is helpful. So telling people, you and I want to work together in May. I just want to let you know when the new year starts or any event now in 2026, my rate is this. It helps them factor it into their budget. And so if that's getting factored in, it's like usually a lot more palatable than all of a sudden if they're like, hey, I budgeted 5K for you and now you're telling me it's 8, like that's a problem, versus if they're like, oh, you told me it was 6.5, it was 5, now it's 6.5, I'll plan for that. And they can, adjust whatever other revenue streams accordingly. So
Yeah, I think that's a great thought. Also, Logan, will you let me know your rate for next year? Just send that to me privately so I can plan
yeah, we got to,
accordingly. That'd be great.
listeners,
Yeah,
Mary and I we
promos.
hire each other for events.
Yeah.
And so, and you're on my list. And I do, well, that's also a good call out, because I probably need to send it to you, but I've tried to ask people, like you and I are potentially working together on a February event. And I had to be like, hey, clients, can take me a second. I got to check with my team on what their 2026 rates are going to be. And again, sometimes, to listeners, there's projects where you as the individual can set the rate, but there's also projects that I've worked where I don't get to set the rate. They just tell me this is what the rate is, and it's up to me to say yes or no. And that's also like the case too, where maybe you wanted to raise your rate, but like I said, that example where someone gave me more money than I would have asked for, it's a good problem sometimes. But also other times it's like, oh, do you just really like the client? Do you like the event? Or is it fits a time of year when you're not that busy and you want something? Like, both parties, you're allowed to ask for more, they're allowed to tell you no, and then you just got to figure out from there where you want to move forward.
Exactly. And you mentioned that before, but it is so true. Like everything is negotiable. And yes, they might be firm, but like I really don't think there's a harm in asking once. Like what, like, having that just like once conversation, like what about this? No, it's this. Okay. Or whatever, however much you want to push, but I don't think it's offensive to ask about that negotiation once. And I think that leads in well to our next question, which is, Logan, what do you say if the client says that your new rate is out of their budget or higher than expected? How do you deal with that? And do you negotiate?
Oof. No one answer fits all, listeners, because I worked with a major sporting team and their rate was like $25 an hour. And at the time, I was charging like 75 for corporate, but I was like, for my sports folks, I was like, let me just educate them a bit. I'm like, normally this would be between like $40 to $60 an hour for what you're asking. And they just went, well, it's $20 an hour. Hope we can work together. And it's like, okay. And I will say I worked with them for a period of time, because I was like, this is worth it. I want to do it. And I got to meet my colleagues. And again, I was like, oh, okay, it's not all people who do what I do all the time. Hence why this is more like fun money for them on the side in addition to a full-time job, versus I was like, this is my career. I can't be making this at every job I work. So yeah, I think it's knowing if there's wiggle room, if they're saying it's out of their budget. This is where we've also talked about on past episodes about doing like the good, better, best, of having like a low, medium, which good, better, best is a nice way of saying low, medium, high in terms of packages to work with us. Both Mary and I do this for clients, where I can say, especially if they don't know you ask them, hey, what's your budget? They're like, we don't know. Like, great, I'm going to give you a good, better, best. With the key being good, the low one is going to be minimal helping, planning, maybe ahead of time. I'm just coming on site to help. Mid is more help in the lead up and I'll be on site. And the high is maybe me plus some team members and some planning assistants. And that just gives them an idea of what the range is for working with you. And then that can help you figure out, that conversation. But also I think you have to be okay walking away and not getting the business. And I will say that I've gotten better over the years of knowing if it's not the right fit, or maybe sometimes putting a proposal together for a client that I'm like, I don't know if we're going to work to get be a good fit together, but you know what? Let me just put together a proposal. I'm going to throw some high numbers in there. And if they say yes, we'll figure it out, but they're probably going to say no because it's high. So it's also a tool you can use to price people out. But I think it shouldn't be the end of the conversation. If someone said your budget's too high, then start to hone in on more of like, well, maybe I need to better understand what you're looking for. And then those buzzwords, like you mentioned about Mary, like labor, like there's only so little you can charge for being on site because they're physically seeing you there. And there are planners out there that maybe are charging $100 a day, but I'd hate to see what their work is like. But that's one that you have to release people and let them go find someone else who fits what they're looking for.
I think it's interesting too, because just to paint this picture of honestly how broad this conversation is, that's why I think so many people have questions about rates and pricing, and it is hard. Because I also know people who, Logan, you're talking about the good, better, best, the different pricing levels. That's what we do as well. We've talked about it, like you said. I think it is a great model. But some people have a business model in which they are going to charge, this many thousands of dollars for this contract, like minimum no matter what. Doesn't matter what you're asking. This is how much it starts with. And that's because that's what they've decided is worth their time, their energy, their goals, like whatever. It just starts here always. And they have a different client base than we do, for example, because we have a little bit more flexibility, but also they probably make more money in a way. Like it's different business models. So I think that's important to call out because there's so many ways to do it. And then to that point, when I've talked to people and asked them, do you have a budget in mind that you're willing to share? That's kind of how I word it. A lot of times they're like, honestly, I don't know how much this costs. Other times they're like, I was thinking $500. And then other times they're like, I was thinking between $5,000 and $15,000. And I'm like, that's a significant range. And then like the amount of answers that we get and the range in which we receive those is insane for the same amount of work. And so I just want to in solidarity paint this picture that this pricing in our industry is rough. It is so different for these like planning and production services. So that's just a little bit of a shout out. But the one other thing I'll say is when we send a price over to a client, what I always say in the email is something like, our goal is to align with your goals. So I would love to like continue to have a conversation about this if you have any concerns. Does everyone take me up on that? No, but my point is I would appreciate a negotiation. Like that's what I'm trying to open up from saying something like that. And sometimes it works. They'll come back. I've had people negotiate $600 off the contract. And I'm like, if that's really worth your time, sure. But like, that is just that's like a silly amount to negotiate in my mind. But you hopefully know what I'm saying. So yeah, those are some additional thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's also good of talking about how when you present your rate, even without negotiating a new rate, but just like your rate in general. I'm with you, Mary, where for me, it's more like, here's my proposal. I'm also happy to hop on a call to talk through what I'm sending you and answer any questions you have, which I have found is helpful just so folks can be like, oh, what is this? Because maybe they're not familiar with the wording of what we're doing or why we break things down. And similar to you, a lot of times I am doing project rates that are based on that. If it's a good, better, best, it's just a chunk of change that I have not had a client to be like, Mary is spending 3 hours, you're spending 17. They're not doing that math, but that's on the back. Like, I'm like, there's a rhyme to the reason. I am not the person that's just throwing out a big number and saying, hey, to work with me on this event is 20 grand. It's like, no, I've taken time and I've added in your day rate, your travel rate. I've had to add in another thing I like to do is like with per diems or paying for food for my crew on site. I just work that into the project rate. And then the pass-through costs I have for clients are usually travel related, since it depends on how soon or close to the event you're booking, of like flights, hotels, Ubers, like all of that I will bill out. But like, I also like to do team dinners, or I have stuff where I like, the big scary the AV company Encore charges you for tape. I don't want to charge you for tape, but tape costs money. So I got to figure out, like, I have just like a general that goes into my factoring in of my proposals is just like a general like job supplies, so that I'm not nickel and diming you or myself when I'm on an event. I have some like buffer in there. So there's a lot more that goes into it. I think, Mary, this one I'm interested for you because you work with a lot with nonprofits, which I'm sure you get the, is there a nonprofit discount conversation, which I think is probably hard for you because you work corporate too, but you work with a lot of nonprofits, which I can't imagine you give everybody a discount. So like, how do you decide when to stand firm versus like meeting someone halfway on pricing?
Yeah, so that nonprofit discount question, I kudo any nonprofit for asking that question. I think it is within their right to ask anyone for a discount, but I will never give them one because that is literally the work that we do. If I was to give everyone a nonprofit discount, then our rate is just a different rate. So it's silly money at that point. But what I will do sometimes is decide to give, which maybe you could argue this is contrary to what I just said, an in-kind sponsorship, but I'm receiving something in return for that. They're going to put my logo in their program or something like that. I don't do that very often. A lot of times it does come down to a kind of strategic business decision. If I feel like this is an audience that I want to get in front of, that makes sense for perhaps future events for us, then that's when I'll consider that in-kind sponsorship more. We do maybe 1 or 2 a year, so it's not common. But that's the only time in which those prices, I guess, are flexible when we're negotiating that in-kind sponsorship as well. What about you, Logan?
Yeah, I think I also say raising rates if you work with me, there is not one rate that I will only work for. I do have a range. And in my head, I like to think I have a slightly lower range for nonprofits and stuff like that. And then I have a higher range for corporate. And why do I have a higher range for corporate? They have bigger budgets. They are paying more money for certain things to like agencies and stuff that I work with. And so I'm just trying to make sure that I'm pricing myself fairly versus my nonprofits. Like my time is worth something. So I don't, again, I don't want to say it's a discount, but let's just say maybe it's like a $15 range with corporate being on the high end of that. And then $15 less is like my nonprofit rate. And that has adjusted over the years. But yes, as my corporate rate has gone up, my nonprofit rate has gone up because I've also just learned I can't keep trading time for dollars and there's only so much of me to go around. Cloning does not exist. And so I need to charge more for my time just in general so that I can, pick and choose some events. So yeah, I don't normally do a discount. Like I said, that other example though, where I had a larger client that like I didn't get to set the rates on. And I have this every year. I do some major sporting events that like the budget is the budget. Whether you want to, I'm allowed to negotiate and ask for more, but they're like, this is just what it is. And they are big enough events. They know if I say no, they'll get the next person to do it. And those are some events that I just do because I go, this is what it is. And I do have to sit with the taste of like, dang, they're asking for a good amount of my time. I'm missing out on other work. But it's worth it because I'm getting to add that event to my resume that will potentially, lead to future well-paid work. So that's kind of the calculation I do. I don't do the in-kind. I haven't really done an in-kind donation, but I see that a lot with other event planners, managing companies, and then even event providers like AV companies and stuff have done that too. Like you're saying, Mary, with your logo.
Which I think, yes, that when you were saying that, I was like, oh, that's a good point because when I freelance, I'm not doing that. That's just for those like kind of nonprofit client circumstances. But yeah, freelancing, I feel more flexible as well, sort of similar to what you were saying. And a lot of times, like if I'm freelancing, it's typically because I know someone who's asking. So like Logan, if you came to me and you're like, this is what I have, I'd be like, okay, you know what I mean? But like, and then so I think at the end of the day, like you build relationships and sometimes you're just willing to do it because working with them is going to be a pleasure. You know what I mean? And so there's some flexibility that comes with that as well.
Oh, I mean, that's the blessing and the curse of rates and why it's not like, we're not going to sit here as the Better Events co-host being like, hey, listeners, you should be charging this much money. Like it's so varied of what feels quote unquote fair to you, your financial circumstances, what you're trying to make out of it. But yes, I do think there's a calculation sometimes of like, you want to charge more for someone who seems like they're going to be difficult. Or maybe even I will say I buffer some for brand new clients because someone's going to tell you, we don't need that much help. We're really self-sufficient. We got this. And I'm like, I've learned the hard way that like, I need to buffer a little more than what you're telling me. But also I have people like you said, Mary, folks I just love working with. I'm like, I might negotiate a little bit, but also at the end of the day, like you're cool. I know you're going to treat me well. You're going to give me extra snacks on site or nice gear or something. Like there's going to be other intangibles that just make this a pleasant experience. And I'm not losing money going to work for you. Like I'm going to go do it. So there's always wiggle room. I think I just highly encourage you, if you're listening, you need to advocate for yourself because I don't have agencies or clients coming back to me being like, would you like more money? Literally like no one has said that. But I also am sending proposals or sending updates and charging more money and I'm not getting pushback on it. So you have to be the driver, whether you're freelance or if you work for someone, like you have to advocate for you. Very rarely, and maybe in full-time jobs, if you've been there forever, they'll come to you and be like, hey, we need to give you a raise. You've been here too long. Like, but I also think you're the one who has to keep that conversation going.
Honestly, so many great points. I think this is a really valuable conversation. But there also can be cons to this situation of raising rates. So Logan, have you ever raised those rates and lost the client? Because we've kind of scooted around that a little bit. But has that actually happened? Or even on the other side, have you maybe regretted not raising your rates sooner for a certain client, which I bet is a yes.
Yeah, I have more of that. I've definitely lost clients, not from a raising rate, but I've definitely put together a proposal that was kind of the like, I mean, it sounds callous to say, but the like, I don't want to price. Like I've had a handful of stuff come across my plate that's just been the like, wow, this is going to be a lot of work. So I'm going to bill it like it's a lot of work and they probably aren't ready for it. And it's usually someone who just is like sending me a random inquiry and doesn't want to talk on the phone or get on a call or build any relationship. They just want a price. But for regretted not raising them sooner, Mary, oh dear Lord. I feel like I have too many anecdotes of whether it's not raising the rate or just overall charging more. Like we are in the service industry. I'm so good at putting other people's needs ahead of my own. And yet I hate the feeling looking back where I'm like, I just worked my butt off for several months. And financially, I don't feel like I'm in a good place. And that juxtaposition is so tough. And that's usually then where I'm like, I need to raise rates. Um, so I also think rose colored glasses always come around after an event. And so at the end of every year, I've talked about this, I feel like several times now this season, I do a reconciliation between my hours tracked. And I actually now have a monthly task on my CEO day to go back and retroactively put hours in because I'm really bad at tracking them if I'm on site or something. But I actually reconcile, here's how much I charged. Here's all my cost. Here's how much in my QuickBooks it can show me. Here's how many costs went to that project. So I remember the random tape, the coffee, the whatever. So here's my profit and here's how many hours I work. And then I get the really sometimes fun, usually ugly number of then exactly what the hourly rate is. And listeners, I had one event I worked. I did that math. I made $8 an hour on this event. And like that, I love numbers. So I'm like, I can't argue with that. So that next time I come around, it's like, I gotta, I have data behind why I'm going to have to increase my rates. And so that I think is then counter to like our stories earlier, Mary, where it's not necessarily I'm doing the same work. It's like, hey, you thought you only wanted a couple of check-ins. I can go back and show you we were doing several check-ins a week for X amount of months. This is this many hours. This is why it's going up. So that has been helpful for me. But Mary, what would you add to that question?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I honestly don't know that I've had, maybe I have, but I can't recall a time when a past client has been like, no, we can't work for you again because your rates are too high. Like I've never heard that comment. I've had people who have not worked with us again or, new proposals that I put in and they say no, but I don't really know what the reasons are. And, I ask for feedback and I don't always get it. So I think a lot of times just because they just don't have money, they don't hire anybody or, they do go with a different company or they're just looking for something, and it's a myriad of reasons. And I don't know if it's because of pricing. But have I regretted not raising them sooner? Occasionally. Once again, I feel like thankfully I've had the opportunity to kind of self-correct without too many questions. And I do think that flat rate pricing allows us to be able to do that because the scopes are also changing every year. So all of it combined, just people don't really ask a lot of questions on our end. But I have gone into past proposals from the year prior, and I look at my pricing because I have this like pricing tracker that I do for every event, so I can figure out how to price things. And I'm like, why the heck did I do it that way? Like, that doesn't make any sense. What was I thinking? And then it's in those moments where I'm like, oh crap, because now it is a significant jump. So I got to find some in between. So yeah, I think I've kind of like, cursed my past self sometimes. Like, why did you do it that way? But it's because I was learning. And I think that's also okay.
Yeah, it's trial and error, right? And also I'm like, we're in the Seattle, Washington state area, but like I do events all over the country. So there's certain areas where it's like, wow, that's super cheap. And other times if it's like, oh, wow, that's really expensive. And, I will say clients don't often tell you they're super cheap. It's more than I see what they're paying for other services. And I'm like, dang, I was super cheap. So, I mean, that's also a helpful gauge, listener. If you're in maybe a smaller market or a like not a tier 1 city, kind of getting feelers out for what other folks are charging for event related services could help you. Because there is something in it where it's like, if all the other vendors are making more money than you are, but you're in charge of making sure everyone knows where they're going and is on time and everything's running smoothly, like that's an imbalance that I would work on. And an indicator to me that you probably need to raise your rates or, think about restructuring, whether you go to a project model or something like that. But wow, Mary, we could keep talking about this forever. This is one of our lengthier episodes, and I still feel like we had more to discuss. But let's end with our listeners of just what's one mindset shift or phrase that has helped you feel more confident talking about rates and money.
I know that this won't resonate with everyone, but truly the thing that has shifted for me because this is challenging and I am a people pleaser is having a team to justify. Even if you work with contractors or freelancers, I think you could have a similar mindset. It's just the mindset of I know because I've done the math how much I have to make off someone or it just is not worth their time. Like I can't justify that. So that number and doing that math is what has helped me. So that's kind of a mindset shift, but it's also having the data behind it to kind of justify that in my mind. I can't say the same thing about myself and my freelancing, but that's what I can say what's applicable to me right now. So Logan, what about you? What's a mindset shift or phrase that's helped you feel more confident?
I mean, I have it on my desk. It's just that there will always be another event or another gig. And the idea, like just getting out of the scarcity mindset that this is the only opportunity. And that I think just gives me some mental freedom of then looking at the project of being like, do I genuinely want to do this? And I will admit I didn't have that mindset when I first started because I was just I was just hungry and wanting to like get an experience and get the gigs and do all the things. But the longer I've been doing this, the more I'm protective of my energy and my time. And just having that phrase has helped me feel a little less like, oh my gosh, if I lose this, this is do or die. And it has also given me flexibility to then be, stricter with what I negotiate, but also then be more flexible and get to say yes to the really cool stuff that maybe just doesn't pay well because that's just what it is. And I think that helps just also me get away from the personal feeling of having a rate of saying my rate. I mean, it used to be when I was a first original like planning, it was like my rate is $35 an hour. And I remember I had somebody who was like, you should practice writing this down when I wanted to raise them significantly. When I learned I was getting billed out at $75 or $80 an hour or something, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm charging too little. Like I literally practiced, it sounds woo-woo, but I practiced writing, I am a $75 an hour planner because I tried to say it to someone and I started giggling. I was like, no one's going to pay me that if I keep giggling when I don't believe it.
Just make a t-shirt, Logan.
Yeah.
And just wear it around.
Yeah. Well, and like, your rates are going to go up and up and up. So, but it was
Yeah.
just like what I was like practicing it helped me feel more confident. And then again, knowing there's more events that it's like, yeah, there are going to be clients out there who want to pay $25 an hour for a planner, and they do. And that's fine. And 8 years ago, me would have loved that client. And that's okay. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. And Mary, you have our bonus tip this week.
All right, I do. For our bonus tip this week, it is unrelated, but I recently have discovered in ClickUp, which is the project management system that we use. This is not sponsored. This is just what me and my team use. Is they have an AI feature that you can add on, and in that AI feature, you can have like notes in your meeting, kind of like fireflies. You can have the ClickUp note taker, which I didn't know existed until I saw someone else using it. You can do the thing where it automatically joins every meeting, or you can just decide what meeting it's joining. And that's what I've been using it for. When someone's like, can we have a recording of this? Then I add in the ClickUp AI note taker. And so that's been a nice little feature that I didn't know existed. So that is my bonus tip for today.
Love it. Thank you, Mary, for sharing about ClickUp AI Notes. That brings us to the end of our episode. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com. You can join us in person in Seattle on Thursday, December 18th for the 2025 Better Events Conference by visiting bettereventspod.com/conference. You can also connect with Mary and I directly on LinkedIn. We love hearing from you. Just mention in the note you heard about us through the podcast. And if you want even more Better Events content, join our private paid community on Substack. As always, we want to thank you for listening, and we'll be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.